smart, they put their stuff here.
So where do you want to sit? Here, these two?
Or, I think these two, because that, there's a hole there. That's very nice. There's my bed. Almost like under that bed.
Oh, there's my sofa again too. So do you think this looks ridiculous, Suzanne?
Oh, so Mary. I wouldn't have thought that. I would have just thrown it over.
Okay, up to two.
Yes, it's the curveball. Well, you know, I mean, I much prefer yours than this, but
I usually get, oh, much.
as it shows here,
This is a good spot. Yeah, I do all these. Oh yeah. That's like a scary. Oh, big coffee, yeah. Sushi spot on the inside. So like, you think it's the best set? Wait, you're not talking about big. There's like, the front is open, and then inside, ground floor is also open. That's sick. Yeah, so it makes it so it's not like, stagnant areas. Like, they know it before you do it. Yeah. Damn, there you go. And that building. It's been there since I think before. I know, that's not
It's like literally from party waddles. Line up in the middle.
There's like, maybe an extra person who just
Good evening, everyone. There are a few seats here up at the front. If anyone wants to be brave enough to walk up the center, there are a few seats. Thank you very much for coming. We're really excited for this evening and this wonderful book launch. And a lot of the homes were designed by people in the audience, which is super exciting also. Thank you all for coming. And thank you to the Inform team who pulled this together so incredibly, effortlessly, and professionally. All of you coming here to our home where we work is really important to us. Design is just, and architecture and the way we see things is so important to us. This is our lifeblood. So you coming and us being able to have other people share is really important. So thank you again. And I'm going to pass the mic to the publisher of the book, whose name I totally forgot.
My name is Mike Lane. I'm the editorial director at Figure One. First and foremost, I should acknowledge that we're gathered here this evening on the traditional unceded lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. And I have a more elaborate version of that I'll save for now because that's going to be a big topic later on, and is throughout the book. So I'm the editorial director, and I edited this book. And normally our publisher and president, Chris Devante, would be up here. He had a family matter that pulled him away to elsewhere in the province. He sends his regrets. But I may actually be best positioned to speak to the tireless dedication and talent and vision that Clinton and Michael brought to this project. I think its genesis actually predates my involvement, but I got involved in early 2019 and had a meeting at a gorgeous house that Clinton designed. And we started talking about the idea, and it was a journey. There were some challenges along the way, and I'll let Michael speak to the blizzards and wildfires, and there was a pandemic, I think, somewhere along the way. One recent challenge I did want to mention, if only to highlight the silver linings of it. We were supposed to be doing this last spring, but when we got the C-can full of books back from the printer, it turns out the case, like the front cover, the back cover, and the spine, if you so much as looked crossly at it, would fall right off the book. So we had to reprint them, obviously, which pushed this a few months, which allowed us, first of all, to be part of Design Vancouver, which has been amazing so far, and thank you to those folks for having us. And it also means that the book that is available for purchase upstairs, it's my obligatory plug, has been fully seismically upgraded already and should withstand, the usual levels of abuse. And all throughout this, all these challenges, it was Clinton's vision and tenacity that kept things rolling. One of the many great decisions that he brought to the project was reaching out to Michael Prokopow to write the texts for the book. And I was telling Michael earlier about working with him, sort of sinking into his words for, it was a few months, the spring before last. It was just such a enriching, intellectually stimulating, and just an incredible experience. And so I think he mentions briefly in his introductory essay, it is not just a beautiful book full of incredible houses. It very much is that. There's also, though, this just incredible essay that Michael very fearlessly and astutely tackles all sorts of issues that inevitably come up when you're talking about housing and land in BC. So I encourage you all to read it also, and not just enjoy the beautiful photos. And that brings me to the firms. I have to, of course, thank all the firms that joined us for this project. There are just, as you can see, endless incredible houses and beautiful photography, which as it turned out is mostly from Emma Peters, so thank you for that. And wrapping all of this incredible material into the book that you are holding in your hands today was Naomi McDougall, who was our in-house designer at the time and is now with the design department, and she just did an amazing job. So it was just an incredible experience. Thank you, Clinton. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Naomi. Thank you to all the firms, and of course, thank you to Nancy and Inform for having us here tonight. I will pass it over to Clinton Cuddington of Measured Architecture.
So many of you probably who know me know that I talk a lot, but I'm not a public speaker, so bear with this. I really just want to talk about the setup of this book because it was a complicated bit of business. But before I do this, I have people that I want to thank. Some of them have been thanked, but to have Inform, to have Nancy Niels is giving us this place as a lead point to continue conversations and manage the courage that has been laid down to us by first generations of Cascadia regional developers and designers and architects is really important. So to have a place to do that is incredible. So thank you, Nancy. I want to thank Figure One. A lot of patience there. It's a pre-COVID project that had to run through COVID, and it was complicated. To have Figure One manage all of those terms was incredibly important for the piece. All the participants in the book, it's really difficult to pick who goes in the book, but I simply just reached out to all the people that I admire so deeply, who I think represent this loose affiliation of makers that define this next generation, and it gives me a lot of modesty, it gives me a lot of courage to do the work that we do. I want to thank Measured for putting up with all this nonsense of Unbillable, and Piers, my partner, is here somewhere, but yeah, he tolerates. I have my team who help me with bringing together the pieces so that I can attempt to pick up a felt pen and draw every once in a while. One of our projects that we have in the book is a personal project, and so I want to thank my wife also for putting up with this. Monica is a interior designer out of University of Manitoba, where she was one of the ID chicks that I met, and so her collaboration with me on the short house that's in the book is incredibly important and has helped create a pivot to the work that we do, so I thank her immensely for that. And the photographers, as mentioned, Emma, incredibly important, not only for the work that she captures, but for the teaching that she does and how she sees work. We have Andrew Luttrell here, an exceptional photographer. There are probably others, but the book comes alive with their work. Thank you. And then there's an incredible array of artists that are represented on the walls of these. I think Jonathan Simon's here, one that is dear to me, who's on the wall. So we thank all of that as well that makes its way onto the canvas of our buildings. And finally, as the setup of this, some of you, most of you that I had to solicit to become part of this book know the tale, but ultimately the first book that was part of a book launch at Vancouver Special was West Coast Modern House, representing that first wave of contemporary design. And when I spoke with Chris about this book, many of us were lucky to be in the back of it as next generation makers, and I said, we really need to celebrate those who are carrying the torch and pushing down the roads that have been paved for us. And ultimately, Chris said, okay, you're on, make a book. Pick the people that you want, find the writer, and go up to them and tell them that they got to buy 100 copies each to be involved in the book. New delivery model is very difficult. Tony said, "What the hell? That's like the dimension of my office. Like, what am I doing?" I did host an event for UBC School of Architecture, and they came through, and as a present, they gave me a copy of the book. So someone clearly has given books to UBC to hand out. They didn't know this, so that I was in it, but so it's making its rounds already. But it was hard because we're living in a day and age where we have to seek out different delivery models, and I asked firms to think about what their promotional strategies are for the year, and to be involved in the book and pick a project which is not curated from our end. I wanted to pick people that I admire, but I wanted them to pick a project that best describes their process, and that's how these pieces came together. So there is a vast array of work in here, and I tried to create an outreach that was a little bit more than Vancouver-centric, and that's easy, as BC has an incredible array of thinkers, but as was alluded to, it put Michael in the middle of a forest fire. You're lucky to have not had to fight a fire during the making of this book. So I was able to bring all of these people together, but it was a long, drawn-out proposition. Some of these projects are probably over 10 years old. So excited that these pieces came together. It started initially as a piece that was going to be cross-sectional to Oregon and Washington State, but we just realized that the rich talent in British Columbia was enough to put together an exceptional book. So with that, I scared to death of how this whole thing how it will come together. I reached out to the only person I think could help navigate a really difficult typology of book, which is trying to somehow bridge between an academic text and a coffee table book, managing the subject that is really focused on the 0.1%, and how to celebrate the work and courage of clients, allowing for this to take place, but also to try and allude to the privilege of this and the fact that there are many who are not in this book, that are sort of a lost voice. So I did my best to build a cross-section from single moms running sole proprietorships all the way through to large-scale firms that were dabbling and playing as really reprieve from commercial projects. So I think we have a good cross-section here. I'm personally excited that there is at sort of the center of this effort is the ability to include Bill Peckett's project, Exeter House, which he was really my first employer in Vancouver when I came from Saskatchewan, and an incredible talent, Leslie Dunduzer will be writing a book, incredibly exciting because he has been so influential to so many of us who are in the book. So excited to have that. I'm excited to have, through all of that, the ability to even talk about other building developments that are starting to take place in the space of residential design. To sort of have Ingrid Rooker in the book was a good way to kind of balance that conversation. But without Michael, this book wouldn't have happened, and his voice was rich, and he continued to teach me through this as to how to look at buildings and what are the things that we should celebrate and what are the things we need to be aware of moving forward. So I'm incredibly grateful to not only have you on this book, but also to be able to continue to fight arm in arm with you and others that are in the audience on the Arthur Erickson Foundation, trying to celebrate that work that was done to allow for this work to flourish. So thank you. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. It is such a pleasure to be here at Inform. Always a magical space for conversations about beauty, art, design, contemporary society, and in this case, architecture. I want to thank Niels and Nancy, the staff of Inform. Always, you're so gracious in opening up this amazing space, so thank you for that. I'd like to thank figure one, my colleagues who work so tirelessly on this book, my dear friend and colleague, Clinton Cuddington, the architects, who I would name, but I will not for sake of brevity. Thank you for your amazing work. The people who occupied these amazing houses, who were so gracious to me. And the fact of the project as process. The study of architecture is important because architecture is culture, and culture is humanity. And the obligation of any critic is to think not only about the resolution of the problems of typology, building houses, but going beyond that and thinking about the means by which those problems are solved, and importantly, in the context in which they're solved. So this project, as Clinton said, and as Mike, thank you for your kind words, noted, was long in duration. COVID, as you all remember, transformed all of our lives. And originally the idea was that I would come to BC and look at houses. Now, there's an important piece to note about this project. In identifying these amazing firms, Clinton and I made a decision that we would not choose houses from their portfolios. Rather, we would ask the architects to choose a project that was residential for us to consider. The reason for this, and I think it was a very inspired decision, is that it's easy, or maybe not easy, but potentially easy and problematic, to make a book that is curated by the person who's making it. So I could look at a house and say, well, I really like that house more than I like that house. And so it would be a series of houses that fit my interest in architecture as a critical practice, but might reflect my aesthetic sensibilities. And that, I think, can be good, but would not have been appropriate for this project, because central to the idea was to look at what practitioners in this moment in time are doing around the issues of residences, domesticity, the challenges of making space for families or for clients, or both. And so the result are projects that are diverse in form and character, diverse in locations, diverse in budgets, but which are linked, profoundly importantly, by the mission of the designers to answer program, what is a house, to meet the needs of clients, the particular circumstances of a group of people, a family, or an individual, or whomever it may be, to respond to the realities of site, to keep in mind budget, to understand code, and the regulations in place for the design and creation of buildings, environmental issues, earthquake issues, size, all of the related things that must attend the making of homes, of spaces where people live and thrive. In that light, this project was remarkable for me, personally, critically, for several reasons. And I'll make this quick, but it's important. So I grew up in Victoria, British Columbia. I was always interested in architecture. As an undergraduate, I studied architectural history with a very distinguished scholar named Alan Gowland, Canadian, who made much of his career in the States, and then came back to the University of Victoria. So that's a piece to keep in mind. I was raised to think that the house was the most important type of architecture, and I was one of those kids who, growing up with modest circumstances, lived a type of aspirational dream of thinking, oh, look at that amazing house. I remember driving as a kid through the uplands, if you know Victoria, and I was always fascinated by some of the Georgian revival things and the pseudo-Frank Lloyd Wright things, and I didn't particularly understand modernism. I mean, the flat roofs and all, that all sort of changed, and I'll come back to that in a moment. So as I say, this book was a journey, professional and critical. When we sketched out the idea of coming from London, England, where I spent much of my time, to British Columbia, it was like maybe you could do it in 2 visits. It turned out to be 9 visits. So I got very familiar with Air Canada and various flights. The COVID protocols of ArriveCAN, mastered that very quickly. Made very good friends at the Budget Enterprise and Hertz Rental Agency here at YVR. Reacquainted myself happily with the miracle that is the BC Ferries, in the miracle of what is this place. Place we call British Columbia, a settler colonial name applied to indigenous lands, unceded. 97% of British Columbia is unceded. I say that now because this project sought to interrogate and visit the brilliant work of architects. And I hope it does that. I hope that the architects feel that their thoughtful answers to questions of designing houses has been met with an appropriate critical understanding. But for me, as a historian, there was a transformation in my thinking that started almost a decade ago when the Government of Canada released the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, a document that showcased in the most painful and vividly difficult ways the consequences of settler colonialism and the genocide inflicted on Indigenous peoples. I grew up in a rural part of the Saanich Peninsula, 650 feet away from the Indian Reserve, it was called, the Sartlet Nation. I remember in my high school, a predominantly white high school, that the Indian kids were always disregarded over there. I, as a settler, was sort of a participant in that. My complicity was full and not necessarily reflected. When I read the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, I found myself confronting my own history as a settler in British Columbia, studying architecture, settler architecture, and having to come to terms with the question about how do we reconcile the brilliance of practitioners who dedicate their lives and their capacities to making spaces with the consequences of a long history that we know was problematic, challenging, and persisting. Now, this is not a book that seeks to decolonize the study of architecture in settler British Columbia, in no way. But it is a book, as Mike pointed out, that has an essay at the beginning that sets out the premise and my experiences. I met remarkable children, remarkable grandparents. I was given remarkable food, wine, cups of coffee, the most fantastic conversations with the people who live in the houses. In some instances, the people who live in the houses said, well, we don't want to be there. The key's under the geraniums. Or just turn the door and you can let yourself in. In other instances, some architects came by. So I had a remarkable array of experiences going through these astonishing houses. And I cannot express my profound gratitude to all of those people who made that journey through these projects possible. And I will always cherish those conversations. The first essay talks about these amazing experiences, sitting alone on a shore on a Gulf island, looking at a house, looking at the land, thinking about the generations of people who occupy those places and who have the good fortune of occupying them still. The essay at the end of the book, I felt I needed to write because of my efforts as a scholar, as a citizen, to come to terms with our contemporary reality. If you find yourself with time, go to the TRC. I could only read it for 10 or 15 pages at a time, and I would weep. And I would think, okay, so I have been part of this system, and therefore, what are my duties to society, to my profession, and to myself as a citizen who cares about the potential for restorative and ameliorative change? The astonishing works of architecture in this book speak to the natural abundance of the land, to the integrity of families, the necessity of havens and homes, and that I recognize. And again, I hope I have done the works of the architects justice. But in the essay at the end, which references an essay that Barry Downes wrote in 1972 when he and other architects from across Canada assembled in Victoria for the RAIC convention. And I was 11 years old in Victoria in 1972, and the convention was held in Bastion Square. I did not go. That was supposed to be a joke. But I know Bastion Square, and if you think about that name, it was the place where the Hudson's Bay Company built their fort, opposite the Songhees Nation. So it was a place rich in history. Mr. Downes, in his essay, talks about the BC idiom, the prevalence of wood architecture, indigenous form-making, transposition of Southern California or San Francisco forms, painted ladies, etc., into modernity and flat-roofed glass houses on the once inaccessible lands of West Vancouver and other parts of this land. It's a very striking essay, and it is of its moment. And so in thinking about text, and this project was unfolding 50 years after his writing and 50 years after that conference, I decided that I needed to revisit the BC idiom. And there is, if we think about Kenneth Frampton and critical regionalism, there is something about British Columbia that has nurtured architects, Indigenous architects before settler arrival and settler architects after, who respond to the profound beauty and bounty of this place. So in this essay, thinking about Mr. Downs and thinking about where we are, the TRC, environmental issues, the state of the architectural profession, in Canada, 30,000 architects, 20 registered Indigenous architects. Programs at universities that do not accept Indigenous applicants because, in many instances, the requirements are not met. And then you think, well, why? Structural realities about education for students coming out of their nations, off of reserves, etc. Then we think about the heteronormative culture of architecture. We think about the settler imperatives of architecture and capitalism. None of this reflects in any way on the brilliant work of these architects. In no way. My essay at the back is my effort, and I repeat this, to come to terms with my own complicity in a system. I'm an educator. I talk to students. And so I felt that it was necessary, and I'll tell an anecdote which I hope will clarify this. I told you about my teacher, Alan Gallon. So I thought he was a god when I was an undergraduate. He could do no wrong. I read all of his books, I listened to him, and he gave the sort of standard narrative of settler architectural development in North America. Arrival, those frontier places, settlement of Quebec, New England, et cetera, across the country, get to the west, fine. And the changes in form. Basic typologies of defense, commerce, domesticity. In one book about Canadian architecture, which I revisited 2 weeks ago, he talks about the huts of the Indians being insignificant, and that Indigenous architecture has no relevance in the story that he was seeking to tell about Canada. Well, I don't think I ever gave any attention to that when I read that book as an undergraduate, not a whit. But 40-odd years on, I was struck A, by the sting of his words, and B, my sadness at having to negotiate a memory of a person I hold in great esteem with the realities of what I know to be the contemporary condition which needs moral, ethical, and immediate attention. So in this essay, I talk about what the Spanish critic Ignacio Sola-Morales calls the crisis of the critic. So Sola-Morales is a brilliant practitioner based in Madrid and wrote really beautiful texts. But he said that the architectural critic can only write from a place of crisis. Now, it might be a large ideological crisis, it might be economic issues, might be personal crises. But that sort of cauldron or sort of crucible of crisis invites the interrogation of the things that matter. For me, the crisis is being a settler who is trying to work in whatever way towards raising awareness about the needs to decolonize, to find reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, and as a historian, for all of us to be unstinting in our acknowledgement, examination of the past. So the essay is at the end of the book, is my effort to come to terms with the circumstance of the world. The central question in the essay is, how does any critic reconcile the diligent, dutiful, and thoughtful creation of an object, whether it's an architectural object or a landscape or something, with the circumstances of its production? If every object is a text, and every text is produced in a context, then how would any of us grapple with the profound beauty of architectural thinking, making houses for families, with the larger realities? I ask this question not as an indictment of anybody, but as a call to a type of ethical criticism and an ethical engagement with the making of things in a place that is beloved and fraught, remarkable and not without complications. often unthinking, and yet ethically so compromised. So this essay, which I stand by because I wrote it because it needed to be written by me, can be disregarded, taken up, whatever people want to do with it. Recently, in Canadian architecture, Elsa Lam, our very distinguished colleague, did a little review of Clinton and my book, and she says, you know, it's one of these, I'm paraphrasing, you know, it's a book filled with beautiful houses, which they are, and amazing photographs, which they are, and a type of aspirational materialism, which is often mistaken as a type of coffee table culture, that this book is not that. But she says the thing that the book doesn't do is address the elephant in the room. And I know Elsa, and I've been tempted to just pick up and say, did you read the essay? And maybe she did. And if she didn't, then that's one thing. And if she did, and she thinks I haven't addressed the elephant in the room sufficiently, then that's fantastic. Because if that is the case, then what she's saying is, go farther. And all of us, as citizens of this place, have an obligation at this point in time, and for future generations, to not shy away from history, to embrace beauty and celebrate critical creativity, and always remember that everything has a context. Thank you so much.
So elephant has been addressed, and there are many of you out in the audience who were part of the book, and I just rather than a Q&A, perhaps, you know, as there's been a lot of stimulation here of the issue with a really complicated book setup. Does anyone from the book, participants, have anything to say or want? I think there's microphones. Hello, Trevor. Okay. Does anyone want to follow that and talk perhaps about their involvement in the book? Maybe not.
There's an extra mic I can run around.
Yeah.
I'd just like to thank you and Michael for putting this all together personally. It's been a long time, and we all appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah. Cedric, hell does freeze over. It finally happened.
Yeah.
But it was a struggle in its inception, and it was something that we had to work through and try and figure out how to grapple with some of these issue sets. Trevor, you must have something you want to say. No?
He should introduce himself. Who are you?
Oh, Cedric Berger.
Oh, Cedric.
Yes.
Yeah. Come on, you guys.
You know me, Trevor.
Any other questions or thoughts on the subject?
What time does Michael have to leave here for the airport?
Yeah, last night, yeah.
We're good. 7:30, have a whole hour to drone on. So,
Doug, thoughts?
Remarkable book, and as I remember when you were coming back and forth during COVID, and how difficult it was to get taught to synchronize anything and to be there, and also that you never once let me know whose place it was or what it looked like. You know, wonderful ethics, and I remember that talk you gave last year at the Reside Museum, which is a very, very extended version of what you've done here tonight. And I think it's actually the first time that this sort of analysis has ever been done. You mentioned you'd gone through old copies of Western Homes and Gardens, etc., and that you would look for any kind of evidence of indigeneity in there. You found like basically 0.0001% of images. Now that you're this far into the project, how much, because everything's been changing so wildly lately, how would you readdress things even further, or where do things go from here? Big question.
Thank you for that.
I mean, I think architectural education could use radical reformation. I think the system by which people go to architecture school is based on models imported from Europe that may not be, are not sufficiently engaged with the urgent contemporary realities. If any of you had the good fortune 2018 to go to Venice to see Douglas Cardinal and colleagues' exhibition Unseated, so Venice Architectural Biennale, and it was really the most profound installation featuring indigenous architects from across Turtle Island, talking about the principles of indigenous building, 7 generations, environmental stewardship, sensitivity, families, group living, all of these things, that I'm not doing justice to the installation. But those principles that I think would define broadly indigenous thinking about architecture, I don't think necessarily inform the curricula of many universities, certainly not my university. I think there are some places, the McEwen School in Sudbury, that is attempting to decolonize a curriculum and to bring indigenous wisdom into the classroom. And that's good. It's not good enough. And so I think to your question, Doug, it would be how would educators and administrators and people who have positions of responsibility, if not power, authority that needs to be ethical, think about future generations. I come back to that statistic. Very few indigenous architects registered in Canada. And you think, well, that says something. If in fact there is value in indigenous thinking, which there's profound value, we go through those land acknowledgements, and I'll be frank, I hate land acknowledgements. They're the equivalent to my mind of when you see someone, you say, how are you? And they say, fine. If you said, how are you, say, thank you for asking. I've had a terrible week. Do you mind if we talk for a while? I'll tell you about all of the things that are going on. It's like, I would, So we go through we want to acknowledge that the stewards of the and then we're done. So my university requires a land acknowledgement, so I give one every class. And I always say, what we're really talking about is the invitation for all of us as settlers to think about our presence and our complicity. How did you get here? What's your story? Et cetera, et cetera. So that's my personal position these days as a settler who grew up indifferent to the plight of my indigenous brothers and sisters within 100, 150, 700, whatever it is, meters away. And, I own this is my thing. And as I say, the essay, not to come back to it, was me needing to reconcile my own education. I studied colonialism. I'm a colonial historian, I had this PhD from Harvard. All I studied was white people moving across Turtle Island, bringing civilization. And you think, okay, I did that. That's what I did. I don't do it anymore, and can't. And so I was very grateful to be asked to do this project. And I think everybody knew, as I hope they did, that I would always bring this piece to it. So, transformation in education. Yes, please, Douglas.
One further question. Everything we've seen here is minimalist.
Yes.
Is anyone doing maximalism?
So that is a great question. I had the great pleasure while in London. I had phone conversations with all of our wonderful architects. Wonderful conversations. They were all recorded. And I spent a lot of time talking about my esteemed friend George Baird, died a year ago, professor at U of T, and the whole question about typology and morphology. And I said, wouldn't it be wonderful, and I don't know if Figure 1 is interested in this, I said, wouldn't it be wonderful if someone finally did a book of the mini Versailles of West Vancouver? For every flat-roofed modernist house that uses more plate glass than you ever thought was manufactured, with views out to the spectacular, poured concrete, wood, all of that, there is something with a remarkable chandelier that Madame de Pompadour would envy, or a staircase, marble. And it's so easy to discount the integrity of those designs, the masterfulness of the trades and craftspeople and experts who pour their abilities into doing all of that. And yet, we know that modernism, and I didn't like modernism as a little gay boy, but I've certainly come to like modernism as an older person. And yet, modernism, and I'll tell you why I didn't like modernism. I like Madame de Pompadour. I had sort of fantasies of what houses should be, and so I was enthralled by the past. And modernism, when I finally sort of came to an understanding of it, was highly aestheticized. And I never really thought about the ideological implications of modernism. So, to your question, I think there is a necessary book on the diversity of architecture. If you think about the scholar Terry Smith, he says the characteristic of contemporaneity, and that's the word he gives to the present, is that there are no agendas, no rules, that creativity, whether it's in painting or sculpture or music or performance or whatever it might be, architecture, is whatever it needs to be to meet the circumstances of the time. No dominant, hegemonic set of forms or rules. That's really important, because what it also means is that anything can be the subject of legitimate and important criticism and engagement. And we shouldn't dismiss the, Madame de Pompadour house, wherever it may be, because in fact, that's a product of critical creativity. And we may not like it aesthetically, and it may not meet our tastes, and it may not fit the idea of the critical regionalism of the West Coast, modernist, plate glass, Arthur Erickson, Barry Downs, Ron Tom houses. And these houses are astonishing for their acknowledgement of that legacy, and they stand on their own grounds as exercises in brilliant thinking. But at this point in time, I have no room for the bias which would exclude anything. We have to find a new mode of engaging with the circumstances. Blah, 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 blah. Thank you for the question. Anybody else? All right, I'll give you...
Michael, I'll do some blah blah.
Hello, Trevor. Nice to see you.
Michael, my big surprise is reading your text.
Great surprise?
Reading the book.
Yes.
Set aside the ethics for now. Is that they are descriptive.
Yes.
They are verbal walkthroughs.
Yes.
Over and over and over again.
Thank you.
With very few references
To
the literature of architecture, local, national, international.
correct.
I don't know if I've read a book on housing with so few linkages from the individual creators to the ideas and creators elsewhere. Now, is that a critical position you're taking? In other words, is it enough just to write a walkthrough and not link the ideas in these houses to the literature?
Such a welcome question, thank you. So, this is not a scholarly book. It's a book by a scholar, at least I hope I'm a scholar, but it's not a scholarly book. You write distinguished scholarship filled with footnotes, filled with references to the literature, you understand the historiography, all of those things. I don't think that there was ever the idea that a book that was featuring projects brilliantly presented should necessarily be filled with footnotes that might not be fitting for the presumed publics that would read it. I have all...
I rarely use footnotes, and I write for popular and professional press.
Yes.
And to make references to other key houses is not to make them obscure, but to make them better understood. I really don't understand your Puritanism with regards to the literature of architecture.
I think it's Puritanism. I think it was pragmatism.
Well, here's your chance.
Okay.
You know, our old friend Bannister Fletcher,
Yes.
on the comparative method.
Haven't seen Banny for a long time. I hope he's okay.
At the end of the book, I said, damn it, I wish Michael had done some comparisons. Put a few of the houses together, one versus another, or a grouping.
So,
the gestalts in it,
Yep.
and that was absolutely not done.
no, absolutely, and it was intentionally not done. And, I think you are advocating for a different book, which I think would be a fantastic book. But it's not this book. Because to do what you note would be valuable would have meant this was a work of criticism. And then I would have chosen the houses. And I would have made a different type of thesis.
But what you have is you have a book of description. And you set up to talk today, calling it criticism, and it's not. It's a descriptive.
Well, then I stand corrected, don't I?
If I may,
I think, for me, looking and reading at the book, I don't want to know what Michael thinks about it. I want as close as possible the feel of being able to experience the architecture, and I want to be able to make my own decision and my own comparison and my own critical thinking about it. I don't need his. I love his. No, nothing against Michael.
No.
But if the book is from me as a reader to experience and not to be led, but to be allowed, as if I was walking through these houses.
Thank you. I'm not a dog with a bone, but I'm not going to let you off so easily. I made a decision walking through the houses to make no judgments about the work of the architects. This was not what the book was about. It's not me saying this is a mediocre building that doesn't meet the expectations of something, that doesn't have whatever. That none of those houses could ever be described as that. My determination was, this is not a book for a coffee table not to be taken seriously, because in fact, one of the most important aspects of the book is each of the firms get to profile other aspects of their practices. This is not just houses, with people saying, oh my God, I'd love to live there, and that chair in Rasukwanda, but isn't amazing, you imagine. Chardonnay, 9 o'clock, wine o'clock, whatever, that's not what this book was about. I wanted to give readers text that might match the immersive invitations of the photography. Absent the necessary, but oftentimes bloated criticism that comes with footnotes that marks architectural criticism. So I will concede that this is not a book of criticism. Thank you for that. I would say that it's more than simply a book of description. I tried to create, using words, the experience of being in these places. I had the great privilege of actually going into people's homes all over the province, having people welcome me, being kind to me, talking to me. Now, I didn't relay ever information of any personal nature. All I dealt with was spatiality, materiality, and the general feel of things. And I would say that may not suit a lot of people, distinguished critics like yourself. And I would hope that a person who would pick this book up might get a sense from the initial essay that they know what they're actually going to get, as opposed to saying, no, disappointing. And it's fine to be disappointed, but you know, it reminds me of that sort of story about the guy who's in a parking lot on his knees looking for something underneath the lamp. God comes along and says, oh, what's wrong? He said, I lost my car keys. He says, oh, that's absolutely terrible. Let me help you. So the guy gets down and they're looking around. And then finally the visitor and the helper says, are you sure you lost them here? He said, no, I lost them over there, but the light's better here. So I take your point, and there are other projects. So I would invite you, Trevor, and other people to revisit the contemporary architecture of British Columbia, settler British Columbia, and fill it with footnotes, fill it with references, make all of those necessary connections to the history of architecture from wherever to wherever. I did not set out to do that with this book, and I stand by what I say, and I think that last essay, The Elephant in the Room, approaches criticism. But the descriptions of the houses, not my thing. And you know, one last piece, because now you've got me in a celebratory party mood. Can't imagine the number of times that people said, what's your favorite house? And I said, everyone. And people say, oh, come on, don't be a jerk. You must have a favorite. It's like, nope. And I don't. And if it were a different type of book, I might say, yeah, that one, not that one. But that was never the intent. It was to showcase and profile firms making houses. And the best way to do that, it could have been just a book of photographs. Great. But I wanted to sort of say, you know, if you come to this house, and you happen to have the pleasure and luxury and honor of being in it, this is what it feels like experientially. And, you know, I could have put Merleau-Ponty in there, or Bachelard. These are people who talk about the phenomenology and experience of being. I could have done that. But that, to my mind, would have been some pompous academic trying to change what was a really beautiful idea of profiling contemporary residential architecture in southern British Columbia. And I thank the architects for the work they did. And I'm really grateful, Trevor, because I think you're a wonderful colleague, for, I was going to say pricking me, but I don't think that's the right term. Thank you all.
It's really just a side note, perhaps.
Please.
But in writing your book, I haven't read your text. I came here to behold your talk, and I'm not versed in architecture as most architects and critics, academics are here. But perhaps, isn't it, in a way, your writing, as I listen to this sort of academic standoff, but isn't it sort of disavowing sort of settler thinking in this academic tradition of citation and reference in a linear manner that's always sort of a circle, pardon the expression, a circle jerk amongst academics,
Right.
who can have the best reference and the best ideas. So I haven't got the text, so I just noticed that. But what I'd like to know is, how do you honor, and as you speak to, how do you, like, I don't know if honor is the right word, and speaking to this, and I agree with you in terms of the acknowledgement of land. I don't think it goes far enough, or it becomes just an ad statement to me, which is more disrespectful. This is just my opinion.
Oh, no,
But
grateful
how
for your
do
words.
you honor, how do you, like, I don't know if honor is the right word, but how do you honor the settler architect, like building, as it were, and keeping that in mind? Like, how do you honor the tradition in this?
You mean settler tradition?
The settler, well, not the settler tradition, but the indigenous, like, how do you honor the indigenous? Like, what is it to honor the land? Like, how do you honor the land in the design?
Right.
Because as you've noticed, and again, I come from an ignorance of, it's not an ignorance, but I'm not an academic by any means. But how do you let's say, the indigenous to sort of modernists, as we, like the modernist influence of
Right.
European, and if not appropriating Japanese, if I may.
Absolutely.
Without influence, no one speaks to the Japanese influence. It's not that they don't speak, we know this of Arthur Erickson, etc. But so I'm going on.
No, your question gets at the heart of the question.
Like, do we burn sage and salt? Like, do you know what I mean?
No, that would be the equivalent of a land acknowledgement with
Yeah.
sort of with ophapatry
But you
possibilities.
understand what I'm saying.
No, we don't want that.
Yeah.
I'm not a person who believes that the advancement of reconciliation can be done with a book or an essay or a kind few words.
Yeah.
It's a process. And it's about allyship and collaboration and openness. It's about confessing ignorance. It's about confessing complicity. It's about saying, I'm really uncomfortable by this. I don't really know what to do. I've had people say, you want me to give my house back? And I said, that's not what I'm asking for, not at all. And I don't think Indigenous peoples are asking for that categorically. What I think is the request is thoughtful reflection. And then, when possible, meaningful action. Now, I'm not in any way saying that this is a complete answer or even a particularly successful one. That less essay is personal and it's mine, and I stand by it. And people can say, fuck you, Michael, it was a terrible lesson, you shouldn't have written it. And if they say that, I'll say, thank you for letting me know. And then I would say to them, you write your own fucking essay and see what you can do. All right? So that's how I would say. Thank you.
Okay, we should stop this. So that, just to sign off, essentially, it was a tough proposition. Brian Eno always talks about, creativity is on the other side of surrender. I wanted to set up a book that addressed the fact that there's incredible makers that live in this province and are working in this province with the canvases that are presented to them. I tried to reach out to some of those 20 Indigenous architects to see if there was an involvement. They weren't working within the typology, and their missing voice was something that needed to be addressed. Those first four women that I spoke to, who were the first graduates of architecture, Indigenous graduates of architecture in BC, said, I absolutely would love to be involved in a conversation, but don't make me the token native. Just involve me in a conversation about what you're missing. And let's begin to stir this up as this did this evening. So I wanted to bring people in, celebrate the affiliation we have, and to allow for something to emerge that could lead to other conversations. And Chris, who's not here tonight, wanted everyone to know that he is excited that he is going to begin to think about a book about Indigenous contemporary architecture, and is looking to bring that to the conversation as a stepping stone from the book celebrating Arthur Rontom to this work to the pieces that are not at the table now. So I'm glad it stirred it up tonight. I didn't want to overcurate it and be overbearing, so I'm happy that we got to this place. It probably wasn't the talk you guys thought you were coming to, but I feel that this is part of the conversation that needs to be had, and we're really lucky to be able to work within this moment and to be acknowledging all the things that are not inputs into the work that we do that need to be there. So thank you all for coming. Michael needs to get to the airport.